Hello and welcome to Bitsbox World, Builds Made Easy. So in this video I want to go over how you can make your movement trays or base adapters look awesome in preparation for the old world. So I've been using movement trays for a long time with my wargaming, and they were always there, very convenient, very good at keeping your guys together, but I thought, why not make them part of the battlefield? So the movement trays here are base adapters that I made for my fantasy army ready for the old world. You can check that video out how I made these. So to get these up to standard ready for my battle, first off you're going to need a bit of PVA glue, just craft glue. And these bases that I made myself, you can see that sometimes the measurement might be slightly off or there might be a bit of gappage, but that is absolutely fine because we're going to be covering that with our basing material. But to get your basing material to stick, you need to start off by painting your base adapter or movement tray with your PVA glue. So the PVA glue that I'm using I got from a build centre, and you can buy it for sort of building purposes in big bottles, 4 or 5 litre bottles, and that just gives you plenty of glue to use with all of your crafts and all of your builds in the future. What I do find though is that glue is quite thick, so I just water it down a little bit before I use it, just so it's a bit more easy to spread. So the next thing you want to do is get your basing material ready. So I've got this sand here. It's a mixture of kiln dried sand, which is very fine, and a bit of sharp sand, so it gives it a bit more texture when you're applying it to your builds. You want to cover all of the areas that you've painted with your craft glue, with your PVA. Make sure it's completely covered. Let that dry. It does take about 12 hours to dry, but once it's all there, it's nice and hard and set, ready for you to start painting. So I'm doing multiple different base types. This is another base type that I've made, so you can see it doesn't have the center sections to it. That makes it very versatile as a base, which is really good for using, I don't know, trolls or croxigors, or if you want to, you can put infantry on there as well. So if you miss any spots when you've done your first level of coverage, you just want to apply a bit more PVA glue, and then you can just dip it again into your basing material to get it fully covered, so it's nice and ready to go. And this is something that I do as well. I just use a knife to run down the edges just so it makes them nice and flat, because when we put our models in there and the bases fit inside, we need to make sure that there's nothing in the way on the edge so the models fit nicely. This here is my wet palette. It's a homemade one. Really useful tool. You can check out my video of how I made this, but it's great for keeping your paint nice and wet so you can use it for a lot longer. So the first thing that you're going to need to do is paint your base adapter with a base coat. So I'm just using some black acrylic, just sort of cheap black acrylic that you can pick up at an art store. You could spray these black if you wanted to, but I'm just going to go for a bit of paint because I had it ready and lying around. So the reason I do a base coat is so that the whole base is one colour to start off with, and it just gives you a nice even platform for you to start painting later when we go to other colours. These base adapters have been really useful. They have allowed me to start to use my fantasy models from the past with old world as the base sizes have increased. I also just paint a line along the edge of the bottom because that sort of helps to cover any of the sand that might be just lapping over the edge there. You could paint the whole bottom if you wanted to, but it's not necessary. So once painted, set it aside and let it completely dry. Give your brush a nice wash so you're ready to apply the next colour of paint. So they're looking good, ready for me to move on to the next step. So these base adapters are associated with a unit, so you want to make them look like the bases that you've previously painted on your model. So have a look, check it out, and then you know what you're working towards. So I'm going to be using this again, just acrylic brown, and I'm going to be doing various coats to work my way up from a darker shade of this brown all the way up to a very light shade. So first off, I'm going to mix this brown in with some black so it takes the edge off the blackness of the base that I painted earlier. So going to get a nice dark brown ready to paint onto my adapter. You want to take a bit of the paint that you've loaded onto your paintbrush off, just wipe it on a paper towel, and that would just allow you to sort of do quite a heavy dry brush, but you don't want to be painting into all of the gappage that you painted black earlier, because you still want to have a bit of that black colour as sort of the deepest, darkest colour that you're making on your base adapter. So make sure that your brush is nice and loaded up, but not too loaded. Otherwise, you might as well have just painted these brown in the first place. So I'm leaving a bit of gappage and making sure that I cover the whole thing. And you can see the difference between a black base and the brown one that I've just painted. So there we go, first coat down of the darker shade. Now we want to go a bit brighter. So I'm going to mix in some whites now into the brown that I put on my wet palette earlier. And I want to make this look a bit more earthy and get to a nice sort of, not all the way up to white or bone colour. I want this to be just a bit brighter so it pulls out some of those highlights on the base. You do need to remember to just take off any of the thick paint that you might have on your brush, so just rub that against the paper towel and that will just take off the heaviness of any of that paint on your brush. And you can start to see the contrast between the first layer and the second layer. Now we're going to get ready for the final coat. So this is my third or final coat that I want, and I want to make it sort of quite a bony colour. This is going to be our brightest highlights. You could go, if you want to, right up to white or do some specks of white or a bit brighter, but I like this sort of middle bony colour for mine. And as you paint it on, you can see how it just pulls out the highlights on that base. Again, you really do need to make sure that your brush isn't fully loaded with thick paint, or it will just go into the recesses of what you've done earlier and just paint over those levels that you've been building up already. So make sure the whole base adapter is covered, and then you're ready to get onto the next section. Just a shout out to my wet palette again here. Once you're done with that paint, if it's still wet, you can close it up and use it again later. So I have prepared multiple bases because I'm going to be using some different flocks and sort of some scenery on my bases. But if you did want to leave this as an earth effect, that might fit in with some units that you've got. For example, dwarf miners might like an earth effect only. It's time for some more PVA glue, because I'm not going to leave an earth effect. I do want to have some sort of grasses or algae or flock onto my bases. And I'll start off by just picking out all the areas that I want my, in this instance, static grass to stick to. I do love static grass. It's awesome, and it stands up nicely and it sticks down really, really well. You do want to just be mindful of it though. Don't breathe it in. It can really give you a nasty shock to your throat. So be very careful with that. But you can stick it on, apply it on. It's quite clumpy. I like to, as you can see, I'm sort of sieving it through my hand as I'm putting it on, rolling it between my fingers to break up any of that clumpiness, so it will sit nice and evenly onto my base. And I've gone for sort of a split grass effect on this one, so it's not completely grassed. You could completely grass it if you want to, but I quite like this split grass effect. And once you've tapped off any excess, I take it outside and just give it a hard blow to take off any loose grass left. The other thing I'm going to be using is this green flock. And this sort of reminds me of, I don't know, the scum that you might see on a pond or in a marsh type area or wet areas. So I'm going to use it in a similar way and show you the difference between the static grass and this green flock. I do like using this flock when I'm making gaming boards, for example, because you can mix it in with PVA glue to sort of make a flock PVA glue mix, and it makes the green effect when you paint it onto a board look really, really nice, and it also is quite hard wearing. But similarly here to the static grass, you just want to make sure that you've got good coverage over the whole of your base, making sure all the areas you've painted with PVA are accounted for with your flock, and again tap it off. So here we go. This is the two examples, one flocked on the right and one static grass on the left. Both of these movement trays are now ready for the battle, but we want to make them look even cooler. So I've got some extra bits that I'm going to be sticking on. So I've got a variety of different plants that I'm going to be using, either like IKEA plants or plants that you might put in a fish tank, or things that you might see at Christmas that go in a wreath. I've got loads of different things. And then this here is some flowers that I did buy. I've not used before, so I'm going to be using them today. Start off by processing your plants and getting them usable and ready for applying to your base. And I had an idea that I'm going to make sort of a exotic swamp-like base for some particular units that I use. And you'll see them once that has been built. So I've got all of these sort of nice coloured, exotic looking plants, all from fish tank suppliers. So you can get them if you're looking at sort of aquariums at home or fish tanks at home. They have all of these really awesome looking plants, and I always think of the jungle when I see these, or something sort of deep and hot and humid. And it always makes me think of awesome ways that I could use these if I'm doing a jungle themed thing, because they look quite poisonous. They look like they would be in a hostile environment, and they look really cool. So you do want to take off some of the flash that's on them, clean them up, process them so they're nice lengths to be added onto your base, and that they don't sort of overshadow your models as well. You want them to be complementary to your models. And because I'm doing a jungle theme on this one, I'm going for a whole variety of different plants, and it adds to the feeling that your models are in the lost world and that it's going to be hostile for them. If the plants are hostile and dangerous, what else is going to be dangerous in that wilderness. Right, so you're going to need a pin drill to be able to glue these plants in, and you want to make sure that your drill bit is about the same size as the stem of some of those plants. So you'll apply a bit of pressure into wherever you're drilling into your base, and because we made them with wood, it's quite easy for you to drill in. And I'm going to use a bit of super glue, and you just want to get your plant that you're going to be sticking on, glue the stem, and then you can just slot that straight into the hole that you made with your pin drill. It really does secure it down into the base by pushing it into that hole. It makes it so they will last. It will stay on your base, even if packed away, knocked, it will stay there and stick. It won't come off, which is pretty good because it keeps your bases looking awesome. So this one, I'm just doing some varied plants across out of all of those that I processed earlier, so it looks nice and jungly. And I just can imagine my models bursting through these plants as they rush on towards their enemies. And I just think it adds to the effects. It's going to make it look really, really cool and awesome. The great thing about this is you can really have some fun with it. You can add as many or as little as you like to it, but I really think it just makes your bases stand out from just being mud and grass. It gives it an extra level when you're playing and makes things look really epic. But what is it going to look like when I put my models onto this base? Let's have a look. There we go. There's my skinks bursting through the jungle, charging at the enemy. And I really like this because you can set this up on sort of a shelf or in a display cabinet, and it just makes them look really, really good. Let me know what you think about this in the comments below, but don't go away. Yeah, I've got a few other bases that I want to show you. So this is my sort of, it reminds me of Scottish thistle, and I really like this with the little purple balls. I got this at Christmas. It was about £1 for a big stem, and I thought I could really use that. What you need to do is just take off any of the leaves at the bottom once you've cut it away, just so you can make sure that you've got a nice stem. And then I'm going to stick these into all of the drilled holes that I drilled earlier onto this one. And this is a static grass base, not the flock. So I'm going with a sort of mud and grass and Scottish thistle theme on this one here. I'm not going for as many plants on this one, just 4 will suffice. But it does look really cool, the little purple balls. I really like that on this bit of foliage. But who's going to sit in this one? And this is my high elves. They're going to be sitting in this, my swordmasters. And I really like the contrast there of the purple against the yellow. But they sit really nicely in this movement tray, and it just gives it an extra element. Now, flowers. I've not used flowers before, but I really wanted to have a go at these. People tend to use these for model train building, using them to line streets or in parks and things like that. But I just thought they could be really useful with basing. They come with an adhesive back as well. And when you stick them on, they do make a nice contrast against the mud and the grass, With the adhesive, it is good enough to hold them, but I would suggest putting a bit of super glue to make them hold fast. And these are a real good complement to my nicely painted Empire handgunners there. It really makes them stand out and look great. So there we go, some bases completed and ready for my unit. So let me know in the comments below which one was your favourite. Are you going to do anything spectacular or special with your bases and movement trays? It's a really good and nice way to just enhance your models and make them look even more awesome. Thanks for watching Bits Box World, builds made easy.